What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you for tuning in. I have Simone FM Spinner. She's the founder of Wine Rocks and Chasing Grapes in Lakewood, Colorado. Simone, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. We're going to talk academia a little bit. Clearly, the book collection behind you, you are a book nerd, a self-proclaimed book nerd. So I'm excited, especially to fast forward all the way to the end and get to your playlist because I am going to be taking notes for sure. So
Great.
I want to take us back, as kind of we always do. This is almost like a new origin story for us as individuals in the hospitality industry.
Yes.
So as a prolific speaker, you're not booking any gigs right now out there,
No.
home, things like that. So you were hit pretty hard by this because interacting with people face to face is a major part of what you do. Take us back to when you realized this was happening, it was real, and it was going to majorly affect you. Give us some insights what that was like for you, and then we'll talk about the journey out of that.
Okay. Well, I do a couple of things. Working in the gig economy and hospitality my whole life, I've learned to always have backup plans, backup jobs. So I teach at the university, CU Denver, wine classes. And then I do my speaking and consulting. And I also was I was an international manager, regional manager, Canada and the US for a culinary tourism company based out of England. So the first clue for me, I was in Canada overseeing my cities, and there was word on the news this was happening. I had a trip booked to Toronto that was canceled because all of the restaurants weren't going to be seeing people anymore. And this was the end of February. I came down with the trifecta of flu, bronchitis, and strep for 2 weeks at the end of February. And when I crawled out of that, I lost my job. My whole company went out of business the beginning of March.
Wow.
At the beginning of March, before really everybody else was being hit very hard by this, our company was hit hard because we're an international tourism company and nobody was booking culinary tours anymore. So my whole team of about 22 people and I all lost our jobs the 1st of March. And then the whole company went under. So that was the first clue. The second clue was that following week, all of our classes at the university went online because we couldn't meet students anymore in the class. So we all had to scramble major fire drill to transfer everything from in class to online. And we're still working out the kinks of that. So those two things happened. And then all of my bookings canceled. So
like that, everything gone.
Everything in about 6 days.
Yeah, the same. I feel that it was like 4 days. The next 4 months just vanished, just dropped instantly.
And they did. So the super fun part of what I do is everything is freelance. Even the university job, I'm an adjunct professor. So I have not been able to apply for unemployment yet because us gig workers they haven't figured it out yet. It's approved, but there's no way for us to do it. In addition, my other company was from England, British, so they didn't pay into unemployment. So I'm still waiting for my last paycheck from that company, which I doubt I'll ever get. But I'm still waiting to be able to get myself shored up financially in a way that's sustainable. And unemployment isn't sustainable anyway. So it's been pretty tricky, but I do have some really interesting freelance writing gigs that I'm doing that came to me after I posted that I had lost my job on Facebook. Somebody that knew somebody connected me to a lady who needed some wine writing. So I've been doing nonstop wine writing for 3 weeks. So I have that, which is great. And there's nothing I love more than researching and writing. I'm an academic, so I love that. I'm still working on my...
For just a second, Simone.
Sure.
What you just said really struck me. You reached out to your community. There's a couple things at play when I think about the hospitality industry. One is we were pretty quick to dismiss social media and say things like, people are always on their phone and they're not actually in the experience of hospitality, all those things. And sometimes that's true. And other times it's just us wanting to control their experience versus allowing them to interact in the way that they want to for themselves. So there's a lot of that at play. We can go down a whole rabbit hole. However, we're seeing now that social media really is the only channel that we do have. And so those that have built community are seeing that community come to their support. Those that have just sent out obligatory posts of buy, sell, are being challenged. And so you reached out to your community because you cultivated that, and it's paid off because people said, Simone, connect. So talk about just that dynamic, that interaction, because I really want people listening and watching to know how important that is.
I wrote a post about how this is actually an opportunity for us to plant seeds metaphorically and literally for the future. I think you might have commented on it actually, but thinking about, it's spring, planting a garden. I think we're all going to need our own vegetable gardens coming up shortly. So I was thinking a lot about that, and then planting seeds for the future and how to be optimistic instead of so pessimistic about this. I mean, granted, it's horribly destructive, but it's also a great opportunity to disrupt our lives and to move in different directions and return to our values. And a lady named Michelle Bainbridge, do you know Michelle?
Yes.
Yeah, she saw it and she connected me with another person who she knows that was looking for a wine writer. And she has Carpe Travel, Elaine, who has Carpe Travel. So one thing led to another. I contacted Elaine, never have met her out of the blue. And she's like, sure, let's write. So it was that simple. I haven't had those types of social media successes in the past, frankly. But this time, I think everybody is looking to help. In our community in particular, we're so used to being that service-oriented person, that we still need that. We still have the need to serve, even though we're not serving our customers or our clientele, we're serving one another. And it's really, like I said, it's really the first time it's worked out for me in that way. But I think that's one of the beauties of what's going on now. We're returning to our values and remembering that we are a community. Hospitality community is pretty darn tight.
I couldn't agree more. We are a band of rebels, the island of misfit toys. And sometimes we abuse ourselves and each other, actually quite often.
We do.
When the time comes, we galvanize like very few other industries do, because it's innate in us to take care of other people.
It is.
That is in our DNA, as well as just beaten into us in the day-to-day. And I think it's interesting, something that you said, that you haven't seen those successes in social media. And then I go right to your analogy of planting the seeds. A lot of times you don't yield your best crops until the third season, right? Like it's one of the challenges we face as an industry. We are such instant gratification, right? We very much like, we're only good as our last plate. We're only as good as our last table, our last service. And that bodes well. It serves us well. However, it also has us thinking very short term quite often. And so this is an opportunity to think more long term and lean on the things we cultivate over time and just allow the serendipity of that hustle. It's not luck, it's hustle and serendipity coming together. And that's what luck really equals when you think about it. And so I think that's kind of what I hear you saying playing out. So you're putting yourself out there, and clearly it's paid off. And I'm excited to link some of these articles, because I actually maybe believe that these might be your best articles ever, because they're coming from such a different place. So I'm very interested to read them.
I think that they are, because for the first time, not the first time, but more than ever before, I get to be raw and authentic in what I'm saying, instead of worrying about what the editor is going to think or what the audience is going to think. I'm just writing the real deal, and I'm getting more response than ever before, which is great. And that's a huge lesson for me too. You know, particularly as a woman in culture, we're groomed to be pretty or considerate or careful or many other things culturally. And now I'm just letting it rip. I'm just being raw and saying it how it is.
I absolutely. I heard a quote that I thought was very interesting, and I'm forgetting where I heard it now. But we teach boys, men to be courageous, and women and girls to be perfect.
Yes, that's
And
true.
so we're supposed to fail. It's encouraged, and women are not allowed to. And I think that the fact that you're ripping the ceiling off of that is amazing. And I think that more than anything, if anybody listens, like, let it rip. Whatever that is for you, let it rip, because now is a time to kind of find ourselves, you know, as spiritual and metaphysical as that can sound, but like literally,
It's true.
like find your voice, your cadence, your tone, because right now more people are listening than ever, actually.
I think so.
I heard somebody on social say to me, they were like, "How do I do this on Facebook, Jensen?" They're like, "I'm not tech savvy." And I was like, "You're about to be very tech savvy. People in our industry are going to be very tech savvy for this, and people outside our industry are going to be cooks for the first time in their lives." So I'm excited about both of those prospects.
That's awesome. I love that people are having to learn how to cook.
Yes.
You know, the biggest thing for me is there was a book, I don't remember when, decades ago, called Failing Forward. And I read that book at the time. I haven't revisited it. But the biggest thing for me is it's a Winston Churchill quote, and I will butcher it, but it's something about success is being enthusiastic about failure from failure to failure. He obviously said it much better than that. Yeah. But everything we do in reality is a failure in some way, because we set our goals so high. And I've had some hellacious failures in the last couple of years. And now I'm not afraid to fail, which means I'm not afraid to try. Yes. And just risk it all. Because at the end of the day, what are you going to lose? Material stuff, maybe. But you're going to have these self-esteem boosting or just character building situations where you learn and you move. And maybe those failures weren't failures at all, because maybe they were goals that were not necessarily what you needed. Does that make sense?
Yes. It reveals more truths always. No matter what, it reveals more truths. You may not like them. They may not be the truths that you thought they were supposed to be or intended them to be or tried to control them into. And that is challenging. I know, being a serial entrepreneur, my default setting is failure. Like, mine too. And so right now it's so strange. I've been talking about how I'm simultaneously scared shitless and so fired up because I love the struggle. Like, I pretend I want the accolades and all that, and I do. I'm narcissistic as everybody else. I'm a chef. I get it. However, the struggle, the climb, the being exposed is not good enough to then find a way to be good enough at what I'm supposed to be good enough.
Right. I get it. Energizing. I have a term for that. I call that struggling strivers. People ask me what I am or what I do, and I said I'm a struggling striver from the beginning to the end, because I'm always trying something new. I'm very curious. I'm a little bit immature in my approach to life, that I'm a just say yes person. You know,
childlike enthusiasm. I like it.
Yeah, I've quit very, very solid jobs in the past to go run off to Europe and explore things, kind of ill prepared, but I just did it anyway. And I learned so much.
Yep.
I lost everything, but I learned so much. And you can't take that away. You know, people right now who are losing businesses and things like that, I know that that's just got to be excruciating, but there's some silver lining in everything. And I know it's probably pretty darn hard for people to see that, but it's there somewhere, hopefully. Yeah,
So
you have to think positively.
that you have to. It's mindset.
It
Either,
is.
either your default is to be a pessimist or your default is to be an optimist. You can be realistic in both scenarios. I always think about glass half full or glass half empty. I'm always like, you have a glass. Like, you have an opportunity to play. There's a glass there. Like, you know how many people don't have a glass to even think about half empty, half full? You have a glass. You have an at bat. I'm highly motivated and grateful for the fact that I have a glass, that I have an opportunity. And so I think about it in a whole different realm as well. So I'm with that. I want to talk about Anthony Bourdain for a second, because you and I were rapping about it a little bit before. I like the wry smile. I like that there's going to be a banter here for sure. So I've been talking about on the show a lot. I've been listening to Kitchen Confidential, having his voice in my ear when I'm cooking. Danny Meyer in the table, same thing. And then right now I'm listening to Medium Raw. And it actually really struck me. I was literally just like walking around the parking lot behind our house, watching the boys on scooters. And in that moment, Tony talked about contemplating suicide. Yeah. And it just really struck me that he told us multiple times that he was a depressed person. And I didn't want to think about it because of how I aspired to his life and lived vicariously through what he did and all those things. And it seemed like he had arrived, yet for him, it was always a struggle. And so I just wanted to like unpack that a little bit, because I know you have some thoughts holistically about the issue of mental health. And then Bourdain, you've had a few key interactions, and I want to hear about those and share those.
Yes, I did.
So,
well, he did. I was an avid follower and fan. In fact, my Facebook icon is still a picture of him.
Yep. Is it like a black turtleneck? That's like the most dressed out.
He's sitting Indian style. I love the picture. Mm-hmm. I've read everything he's ever done. I've watched every show he's ever done. And he told us a lot. From the earliest moments in his career, he alluded to these things, that he had a finite mission, and he contemplated suicide a lot. In fact, in Kitchen Confidential, we were talking, and you mentioned that he didn't come right out and say it, but there was a part of that where he, if you read between the lines, when the girlfriend or the wife left, or however that went down, he did talk about it in Kitchen Confidential too. Yeah. But he alluded to it in so many different interviews and things like that. So when I found out, I was in Lisbon working on my PhD. So I heard it about 8 hours before anybody in Denver heard it, the news. And I wasn't surprised. I was devastated, but I wasn't surprised at all.
Yeah.
Because it was just the arc of his journey was that fatalism. And he always carried that in everything he did. You could hear it in his voice all the time. So I was lucky enough to have 3 conversations with him in person over time. The first one was when he and Eric Rapar appeared in Boulder at the Boulder Theater for their Devil Angel routine. The very first time they did that. And somebody from the audience asked him about Denver, and he just ripped it. So when I went through the signing table, I took my dad. My dad is a huge fan of both Eric Rapar and Anthony Bourdain. So I asked him about it then. And he just kind of brushed it off like, I don't want to talk about this. Get out of my face. I hate you. Go away. So I had the opportunity to talk to him a couple more times. My dad and I went to the Cayman Cookout. I think it was 2015. And it was he and Eric Rapar and Jose Andres and David Balut were all standing around chatting. And it came up again. And he said, do something, convince me. Convince me about this, because I'll never believe you. And Eric Rapar was trying to temper it down. And he's like, Denver's not so bad. I like Aspen. And I'm like, Aspen and Denver are pretty far apart. But I wrote this book, Denver Food, A Culinary Evolution, dedicated to Anthony Bourdain. And this was my response to that conversation. And I wrote about, it's kind of a love letter to Denver. It's from 1856 to 2018. It came out in 2018. The hardest part about this book, and I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but I'll go ahead and talk about it, is that I got my final edits from my editor the day Anthony Bourdain died. So I had an opportunity to write a nice dedication to him. I sent one of these to his wife and his daughter, and one to Eric Rapar. I obviously didn't hear anything back, but yeah, he was kind of the voice of a generation, you know, and that he hated my city that I love so much really bothered me a lot. Yeah. That he wouldn't give us a chance because there's so much beauty going on here. But I think part of that was just his shtick and his persona. Once he said something, he wouldn't back down from it. And that goes back to this suicide rhetoric that he kept going throughout his whole career. Once he set his mind to something, he wouldn't back down, which is something I don't understand about mental illness. But I think that was part of what happened there. He set his mind to it and just did it. And we still can't understand that.
Well, he's a chef. We're pig-headed and stubborn, to say the least. So getting us...
Too. Yeah. But we all have that issue where we set him on such a pedestal that it shocked us, but it shouldn't have shocked us.
Right.
Because in this business, like theater, where I was before this business, I think it takes a certain mindset that is just slightly outside of the normal box to be able to survive and thrive in this business, whether it's narcissistic or self-deprecating or just this intense drive to survive. And it takes a certain kind of personality. So we all have a little bit of that edgy, which is why we loved him so much. Because we can all identify with that.
Yeah, it's kind of gave us permission to be who we were. You know, I think that made you proud to be a pirate, I think was. And then later on had to walk back some of the things that he said, that's probably not how we should have behaved. And we're seeing that play out now too, with that's not a sustained lifestyle. And so we're having to come to terms and grips with that. And I like the fact that we have to reconcile that and have to debate that and are going to disagree in that. And so I think that's an opportunity. All right, I want to transition. Amazing. Thank you for sharing those stories. Like truly grateful for that.
They're hard for me to talk about.
I know that they are, and I really appreciate them because I just think it just resonates. To your point, he spoke for a generation, and so honoring that, not just his memory, our memories within that context, I think is important. I want to talk about the future because we talked a lot about the past. I want to talk about the future, and I want to have you talk about a couple of the ideas that you have for what happens next coming out of this. We haven't talked about this a lot because we've been reflecting on this moment. This moment is going to lead to opportunity, as you mentioned, and I'm interested in maybe a couple of the high-level opportunities that you want to see us start to cultivate in hospitality.
Okay. So in my academic work, I study the effects of climate change on the wine industry. And part of what I'm doing there is looking at it from a cultural lens. And if the science that I'm using is accurate, we're going to have a real problem in about 20 years with most of our traditional wine regions. And we're going to have to transition to new latitudes and new altitudes and things like that. I think the only way we're going to be able to do that is by opening up access to the consumer, re-educating the consumer that Chardonnay and Merlot aren't the only grapes in the world to drink. We need to look at indigenous grapes and different things like that. One of the ways I think that we're going to have to do that in this situation is really highlighting this, is direct consumer sales. I worked in a three-tiered system for 2 decades as a buyer, as a seller, as a wholesaler. I'm an educator. I worked in that game for a long, long time. And it's an outmoded, broken model, as we all know. I mean, it employs a vast amount of people, but if we could repurpose those same careers into more of a direct-to-consumer sale, in a more of an educational model, and assisting the customer instead of forcing these 10 or 15 tips on them, then I think that's the only way we're going to be able to survive. particularly as we're moving into these emerging markets. Colorado, British Columbia, they're growing grapes in Scandinavia for the first time in human history. Siberia, places like that. And the only way that these new markets are going to be able to survive, and our current model is going to be able to survive, is by opening up availability in supply chains. And I know it's a pretty unpopular topic, especially in a three-tiered state,
Sure.
but I really do think that it's the only way. I'm on the CAVE board, Colorado Association of Viticulture and Enology, and I'm hearing the cries of all of our Colorado producers. You know, they're not going to be able to survive this unless they can get some sales. And the problem with that is, even though a lot of our restaurants are local focused, foraging, farm to table, all of that, they're not supporting Colorado wine.
It's true.
They'll support Colorado beer, but they're not going to put a wine list of Colorado wines. So these people need a channel in which to sell their product in order to survive. I think that's the biggest thing. I think on the other end of it, and I have no idea how this would work, but more clever restaurant people than I do, is we're going to have to start giving everybody in a restaurant a living wage. And that's going to mean prices are going to have to increase, and that whole restaurant model is going to have to be deconstructed and rebuilt. That's not my expertise, but I do think that 6.6 million people applied for unemployment in 2 weeks. How many of those are restaurant people? Or hotel or tourism like me, all of these different people, wine reps. You know, we're going to have to start giving this sector of society, who is the service sector that everybody relies on. I mean, people are panicking because they can't get their takeout order. These people deserve a living wage. These are essential workers. And if essential workers can't make it, there's a real problem. So I think that on these two areas, these things are going to have to change. I don't have answers for all of that, but I think a collective of very creative people are going to have to come together and remodel what we're doing in these service industries. Food, wine, beer, spirits, we're all one big family. And this is just going to have to change. There's no way we can come back and rebuild the same old model, because this isn't the first pandemic we're going to have.
Yeah, I could not agree more that we need to think differently. What those answers are going to be personal a lot of times. Some things will be restaurant wide, some will be market wide, some will be industry wide. Yet just asking the questions, because sometimes we put our past successes and the way things have always been done on a pedestal and demonize what happens next. And so I think there's an opportunity now to say, it's all broken. We have to rebuild. Nothing is going to be the same. It's just not. Some things can feel the same, but we may interact or execute them differently. And so I think that's important. But one thing that I want to just touch on real quick before we finish up, that you said, direct to consumer.
Yes.
I think of everything we're talking about, direct to consumer, selling your product direct to consumer is going to be very important, pivotal, because you're cutting out the middle a lot, and that's where there's room for margin to then make up for investing in people. Direct to consumer to me not only means your product, but it means your message, your brand, your why, and your who, so much more than anything. And to going all the way back to, you had this serendipitous moment because you had a small amount of community that maybe had not paid off, but now it is helping to sustain you. I want to connect those dots for everybody, because you built a small amount of community. It now has serendipitously paid off in a small way, just a small way. And now you're thinking about direct to consumer. That is the direct consumer conduit. Like, you created a direct consumer. Your consumer was different because it's B2B. However, the interaction is the same. So I really want people to stop and think about that interaction. And so any closing thoughts on that? And then I want to hear about some books.
Okay. I think that we all just have to think of ourselves in a new way. We're all a business. Whether we're a business or not, we're all a business. And we're just going to have to learn how to be business people of ourselves and market that business and tell that story. The one thing you and I were talking about before we started is that authenticity of that story, being able to just let it go and let it rip and be honest. We all have to be honest instead of being so shiny and saying, my wine is this wine because of these really elusive, lofty ideals. Just say, this is the heart and soul of who I am. You know Jamie and Steve, the storm cellar. That's the heart and soul of who they are. They make some of the best wine in Colorado, and that's their baby. And they could lose it.
It's true.
Overnight. So I think that we all just have to really take charge of ourselves and promote ourselves in not a skeevy way, not a slimy way, not a used car sales way, but just, this is who I am. This is what I have to offer. Because this is the new normal. I hate to say it, but this is the new normal.
Yeah, I think a couple things to unpack what you just said, and then we'll get to books. Got to get to the books. The Storm Cellar has now been mentioned twice. Jeremy Holloway, sommelier from Mercantile, mentioned them and talking about how they hosted a online wine tasting, right? A little happy hour thing. Love the fact that their brand is motivating two wine individuals coming from different parts of the wine world to mention them. That's it. That's it. If you scale that level of people buying into your brand, you got it. 100% you got it. And so that's what I want people listening to, watching, to share with others is that. And it, to your point, the sleaziness of it, it's like personal brand. It's something that makes people in the industry want to vomit all over themselves. You think you're like some douchey influencer on social media, which we also are demonizing, taking pictures of your food and then capitalizing on it. Yet it's just telling a story to people who give a shit about you. That's what I want people to think about. Your personal brand, you are a brand. You are always selling yourself, but in a meaningful and authentic way, people. So I appreciate you bringing that to light so that you're bringing some well-spoken perspective, and then I can just rant about it and wave my hand around because that's what I do. So books.
Have Jamie and Steve on your show.
I know it's done now. It's already been written.
They're awesome.
Twice. Let's stay with the theme of the serendipity. So we got your book on there, which we will be tagging and we'll be linking stuff, people. So get into the comments, and we're going to share some of the places where you can consume some of the awesomeness that Simone is talking about and that she actually put the work in to. Tell us a couple other things that we should be reading right now to keep our sanity, keep educating, keep growing.
Well, I'm an academic. My brand is Academic Wine Nerd. So I read very academic stuff. And these are some of the books I'm reading right now. Wine and Climate Change by Linda Bell. Super depressing, but I'm reading it for my PhD. These are also for my PhD.
The Geography of Wine, Wine and Culture.
Yeah, these are great. They're academic, so it's not lovely, beautiful prose, but they're both great books. And I can send you the links to these. I'm also reading Pivot by Jenny Blake. This is more of a career cheerleading type book.
Are you often reading multiple books at one time?
I'm always reading 6 or 7 books at a time.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's almost like just pivoting between, for us lazy non-intellectuals, it's like, ooh, I'm watching Ozark, and then everyone says I gotta watch Tiger King, so apparently I'm watching that tonight. That's how we transition. You're reading the most complex wine, culture, and climate change books, but same thing. It's the same.
Yeah, this is another great book. Neuroanalogy, it's one of my favorite books in the world. I'm rereading this one. For anybody in the wine and food industry, this is a great book to read.
Okay.
And then,
yes, wow, getting serious with the road.
So the other thing I like to do, and for more of a light reading, because most of this is academic related, but we're all ADD in this business, right? You have to have a million things going on at once. But these are the other 2 things. I'm not reading, but I'm looking at the pictures.
Copenhagen, love it. And Basque. two of the greatest places to eat in the world. So I hear. I can't travel there right now. Copenhagen.
The best food cities in the world. I went in 2014, the day after I got my master's. I didn't wait for reviews or anything to do edits. I got on a plane. I went to Copenhagen, and I took the train from Copenhagen to Brussels to Paris to San Sebastian, Basque Country, to Madrid. 3.5 weeks of eating and drinking. And Copenhagen and San Sebastian, best food I've ever had.
Amazing.
I've never been to Japan, but if you ever get the chance, go to San Sebastian and or Copenhagen.
Yeah,
I didn't get into Noma.
Sound all right.
Yeah, I didn't get into Noma. They were closed for reset at the time I was there, but that's okay.
Simone, I love it. I love the moments of reflection that you're having. I like that you're thinking forward. I like that you're reading 7 books at one time. Now I gotta up my game for sure. I'm such a mover and shaker. Like sitting reading a book is hard. So the audiobooks have been really good for me.
Audiobooks are great. Yeah. I'm also watching, I don't watch a lot, but I'm watching The Wine Show with Joe Fattorini. Have you seen it?
I have not, but it's definitely been on my radar.
I went because it's Matthew Good and Matthew Rhys, the two beautiful, famous actor guys. But it's actually a really good show. Joe Fattorini, it's a British show. And Wine Masters I've been watching, but that's a lot more intensive.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to take a break and watch reruns of Seinfeld or something.
There we go. Now we're talking. So I like it, from Thoreau to wine culture to Copenhagen food to Seinfeld and everything in between. It's all good. Just keep your mind active and don't lose your shit during this time, people. Simone, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Amazing. And we will get a lot of books linked up in the comments here because people need some things to decompress and also to educate. So when we come back, we're bigger, better, faster, stronger, smarter, more balanced, all of it. So Simone, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
I will, you too. It's been great. Thanks.
Cheers. Yes. Man, I got a lot of books to read. I really like the energy that she has. I love that we got to connect the dots of what it means to really build community that is so meaningful. Sometimes we forget about that. So thank you to Simone for bringing that to light and articulating that so well and allowing me to just spit a little bit. Tune back in, what is that, about 25 minutes. I'm going to be back on here, just take a little set break and talking to Danny Oliver, who is the founder, owner, fermentation nerd with Island to Island Brewery. She also does Beers Giving, and they are doing an amazing telethon this Saturday, April 4th. We're going to talk about that. I'm excited. She is gracious enough and asked if we would do a little best served segment to be able to share on there. So I'm actually going to be cutting together a few of the episodes from this live show, some clips of the best sound bites that really can inspire us. We're going to be raising money to support families affected by this in the hospitality, food, and beverage industry. So check back in for that here in a little bit. And then tomorrow, very excited. If the old interwebs, which have been an issue throughout all of this, will behave, we're going to have our first ever international guest, my good friend and amazing chef, Drew Deckman from Deckman's in El Magor in Valle de Guadalupe in Baja, Mexico. We're going to talk to him a little bit about what's happening down there with him, his family, and the scene in Mexico. So I'm excited about that tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. As always, much love. I am so grateful. I cannot tell you how often I wake up now, low energy, and this show and you really are inspiring me. So giving me the opportunity and allowing me to speak, which is the way that I like to communicate, has been amazing. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. So thanks to all of you. Be safe, be healthy,